Not even sure if this is a controversial take at this point, but America isn't just getting dumber, it's literally being engineered that way. There is a cult of ignorance taking over the entire country, and I'm sure a lot of us have noticed, and a lot of us are also not new to the concept that this is by design, because an uneducated population is far, far easier to control. America currently seems to be running on the same principle as like jingling keys in front of a toddler. And the scariest part is this is working better than anyone predicted. This is also not a video dunking on Americans, by the way. This is increasingly a global issue, but some parts of America are really at the forefront right now. There is like constant noise and shiny distractions kind of shoved in front of your face, so you're too suspicious of the people beside you to realize that you're being robbed blind by the people above you. They don't even need to like burn books anymore, although they are banning them. They just need to keep everyone too distracted to read them and too uneducated to understand what they say anyway. Anti-intellectualism is on a sharp rise, and it's basically the cultural habit of like rolling your eyes at anyone who knows what they're talking about. It's this like knee-jerk reaction that treats knowledge like arrogance and curiosity like weakness. Expertise in any field has functionally become like a social liability at this point. The smarter you sound, the less people want to hear it. The subtext is, if you sound smart, then you must think that you're better than me. And that's kind of the whole issue. It's a lot easier to dismiss someone than to simply admit that they might know more than you. Part of the reason why anti-intellectualism has gotten so out of control is that everybody has a platform now. The internet essentially gave everyone a microphone, and now suddenly every opinion started carrying the same weight as actual expertise.
I have 3 friends. All 3 of them had stage 4 cancer. All 3 of them don't have cancer right now at all.
And what did they take?
Jesus. They took some
Ivermectin?
methylene blue and stuff like that.
Yeah, methylene blue, which was a fabric dye.
This is a bit of like pot calling the kettle black. I'm aware of the irony of me saying this right now. Although I am decidedly not from the group of people that insist Jim from the pub, who's been wearing the same Bintang singlet for 15 years, knows more than doctors. A random guy on TikTok with 0 qualifications can debunk a climate scientist who spent 30 years studying the subject. Like, that's where we're at.
The climate right now is no warmer than it's been many times throughout history.
And if you think you'd never fall for it, you definitely already have. Every single time that you clicked on a confident idiot, which we are all to some degree guilty of. Whether we like that or not, whether we want to admit that or not, we have all engaged with this kind of content in some way, shape or form. But with the random guy on TikTok thinking that he's debunking things that scientists have studied, even though he has no experience, education or qualifications anywhere in any related field. But everyday people are more inclined to believe the TikTok guy because he's confident and he speaks in simple terms that people can broadly understand. It's also neatly packaged into a format that's easy to understand. It has subtitles, it's got visuals, it's a nice little short form video, not like a peer-reviewed journal article that is just all text and it's wordy and it's long and it's full of jargon that you wouldn't understand unless you've been studying in the field. So that's kind of the problem here. When everyone's voice is amplified equally, or rather when everyone's opinion is weighted equally, that's when truth starts to just sound like another opinion. Facts have become debatable, and not in the way that they've always been debatable through like scientific rigor, but because Jason, who dropped out in year 10 but watched a YouTube video one time, feels like he knows better than someone who spent a decade studying the subject. And online, it is never the most informed voices that rise to the top, it's the loudest ones. And once truth becomes negotiable, reality is for sale, and that's kind of where we're at the moment.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
To be fair, politicians figured this out decades ago, and that's when ignorance stopped being random and started being policy. If you can simply convince everyone that scientists and journalists and professors and professionals think that they're better than you, then you don't have to offer solutions. You just have to stoke and catalyze and validate their resentment. And then suddenly rejecting experts feels patriotic. You're not uninformed, you're not uneducated, you're just one of the real ones with common sense. In the US today especially, there are large groups of people who genuinely, with a straight face, think that historians and doctors and scientists and teachers and journalists have all devoted their careers to fooling them, but their lone beacon of truth is a reality show con man who has a lifelong record of fraud and deceit and scamming people. Society can only really move as fast as our slowest walkers, and that's how slow they're moving right now. That's how far behind they've fallen. We might be cooked. It also hits deep in like American and Australian culture because we love the myth of like the self-made man, the cowboy entrepreneur who built it himself with just grit and vibes. None of that book smart stuff. That's like the national bedtime story. Anyone can make it if they work hard enough. Even though that is demonstrably untrue in 2025, that dream is dead. That social contract has been broken. And education as a whole messes with that fantasy because it suggests that success might have to come with learning things. Ew, not learning. And here's where the wheels like completely fall off. It's the loudest, not the most qualified, who dominate the conversation. The algorithm doesn't reward wisdom, it rewards certainty, even when that certainty is wrong. Facts don't sell, but personalities do, and anti-intellectualism became the cultural glue holding all of this together. When people are distracted enough, you don't necessarily have to control what they think, just what they're paying attention to. Part of why anti-intellectualism is so rampant is because people are inherently overwhelmed. We are drowning in more information than our brains can make sense of. There's too many platforms and too many messages. And honestly, I feel that as like a creator running a business day to day. So before we go deeper, I'd like to say a quick thank you to the sponsor of this video, Brevo, because their tools are a lifesaver. They help me keep all of my emails and my messages and my customer relationships in one place instead of like scattered across 12 apps. They're a marketing automation and CRM platform that's designed to help small businesses and creators and online brands actually stay organized and build real customer relationships. If you're a business owner or like a freelancer or you run any kind of online store or service, you already know how much of your time disappears into emails and like customer messages and follow-ups and abandoned carts and updates and all of the little admin tasks that nobody really tells you about. Brevo basically takes all of that and puts it into one place. I've also got a 50% off code for all of this, so stick around to the end. The biggest thing I like is how easy all of the email and SMS tools are. You can send newsletters and automate welcome sequences and set up reminders or promos. And it actually feels really beginner friendly. You don't have to be like a techie person to use it. It's extremely intuitive. Their marketing automation is super powerful too. You can set up workflows based on what your customers actually do, which I really like about it. So instead of like blasting the same generic message to everyone, you can personalize it so people are getting a message that makes sense for them. They also have like WhatsApp and chat tools and a full CRM. So if you're trying to keep track of customer conversations across different platforms or you want to stop losing leads in a spreadsheet, God, the amount of spreadsheets I've tried to keep track of over the years is insane. So this genuinely helped me so much. Plus their Aura AI assistant can help draft campaigns or segment audiences faster, which is a lifesaver when you're like juggling a million things at once. And running any kind of business really, you are wearing a lot of hats generally. So this is just one way that you can make your life so much easier. So if you want to streamline your marketing and boost engagement and actually grow without working like 10 times harder, Brevo is 100% worth checking out. And you can use my link below or the code Brianne to get 50% off the starter and standard plans for your first 3 months, which is an insane deal. This is for new customers, so grab it while it's available. So again, make sure you jump on that while you can. And thank you so much to Brevo for sponsoring this video. This isn't new either. It is a rerun of a very old show. In the 1950s, President Eisenhower's campaign mocked his opponent as an egghead, insinuating it was elitist and effeminate to like know stuff, to know things generally. Senator McCarthy treated intellectuals and artists as if they were like national security threats. Nixon was the one who kind of championed the silent majority, which framed students and scholars as like out of touch elites. All those elitist students. And it's not just an American thing. Hitler did this too. He pretty much wrote the playbook. One of the first things that Nazis did was dismantle intellectual institutions and burn books and frame scholars and artists as like enemies of the state. Even though Hitler himself was a failed artist, but we don't need to touch on that right now. Because anti-intellectualism always plays by the same rule book. Step 1 is get rid of the people who not only ask questions, but are in a position to actually find out the truth of the answers. Fast forward to today and we're watching that same playbook play out again, just with like cringy TikTok edits and a chorus of yes men on Twitter praising it. Under Trump, we've seen direct attacks on universities, journalists, and scientists all wrapped up in like anti-elitist rhetoric. joke, even though that makes no sense whatsoever. His administration froze billions in research funding to major universities like Harvard after they refused to comply with his demands, and he threatened to cut off grants to others that didn't align with him ideologically. A great sign of a functioning and healthy democracy. At the same time, states like Florida have stripped hundreds of books from schools and libraries, replacing education with fear of indoctrination. It is literally just censorship rebranded as patriotism, and the most gullible among us are absolutely eating it up. The strategy hasn't really changed at all, it's just the packaging. Instead of burning books in the street, they're just pulling them off the shelves and banning them. Instead of outlawing universities, they just starve them of funding until they fall in line. Same with media companies, same with news companies. And instead of arresting journalists, they simply don't allow them in the White House, or they discredit them until the truth itself sounds partisan. And that's how you dismantle a democracy, not necessarily with a coup, but with nonsense and confusion. So after World War II, America entered its golden age of comfort. Suburbia, TV dinners, shiny new appliances that promise to make life easier. Maybe a little bit too well, because comfort and convenience gradually replaced curiosity. I actually made a video on this. Television basically finished what consumerism started. It didn't just entertain us, it trained us in a way. Instead of reading, people tuned in, and instead of like reflecting and spending time in silence, they were constantly entertained. Media in general shifted from kind of like asking questions to selling certainty and selling the answers. And when you're constantly being spoon-fed conclusions, you stop developing the muscle to find your own. Then education joined the assembly line. Schools kind of became factories for obedience instead of imagination, which might explain why we all learn trigonometry but not like how to file taxes most of the time. The goal wasn't really to create thinkers anymore, it was to produce good factory workers who follow directions and clock in on time and don't question authority. And then when it seemed like the world might get smarter, the internet arrived. It should have been like the great equalizer, unlimited knowledge for everyone in the palm of your hand. Instead, it just turned into the perfect chaos machine. Information was suddenly everywhere and seemingly unlimited, but verification basically died overnight. Now everyone's an expert, everyone's a researcher, and everyone is yelling. Can we all just lower our voices a little bit? So anti-intellectualism stopped being just like a cultural quirk that gives us a collective headache the moment politicians realized it could win elections. Populist politics turned ignorance into a form of strategy, a way to make people feel powerful and heard by telling them that they don't need experts. Their pixelated Facebook graphic is just as good as a PhD. The real American archetype was kind of born from this. The folksy, like plain-spoken, common-sense patriot who doesn't trust scientists or journalists or universities because those people live in ivory towers. All of this, by the way, said by someone who literally lives in a gold-plated ivory tower. It's a very carefully curated image, like someone who says what they think, no matter how wrong it is. And that image sells, but it's just that, it's an image. It's the richest men alive, many of whom are extremely educated, convincing poor people that education is elitist. The elites literally brainwashing everyday people to convince them that other everyday people are actually the real elitists. Come on now. And before we get any further, I want to take a second to say a big thank you to all of my patrons who keep this channel going. These are all of my upper tier patrons. I love them dearly. They are the reason I can make videos like this and make videos that I find so interesting. If you'd like to become a patron and support the channel, there are tiers for as low as $3 a month. You can get access to the bonus content over there. I just uploaded a video about empathy and logic and how, you know, people claim that they're like logical and they're not emotional, but you can't actually have logic without emotion and without empathy and all of these things that are seen as like separate to logic. Went down that little rabbit hole over there recently, so check that out if you're interested. And depending on what tier you choose, you can get up to 20% off my clothing brand, Riff Supply Co. So if you want a sick tee or a hoodie or a hat, head to riffsupplyco.com. And if you want 20% off, head to patreon.com/brianneworth. And a huge thanks once again to all of my patrons. Trump didn't invent this tactic. Democrats have also been using this for God knows how long, but he did pretty much master it. When he said, "I love the poorly educated," it wasn't a slip up. It was basically a thesis statement for his entire administration. This like viewpoint turns education into elitism and ignorance into a cultural identity. Under this kind of a mindset, distrust of institutions becomes a sort of badge of honor. If you don't believe scientists, you're not uninformed, you're independent, you're a free thinker. Even though you're being instructed on what to think, if you reject journalism, you're not misled, you're just awake. But not all journalism, just the journalism that disagrees with you, obviously. Patriotism gets redefined as defiance, even though patriotism is literally the definition of falling in line with groupthink. That's what it is. And the results are everywhere. Climate denial keeps deregulation profitable. COVID skepticism destabilizes public trust so politicians can take advantage of the chaos and usher in fascism. All of the endless culture wars over gender and race and sexuality, those aren't necessarily moral crusades, they're just distractions. And this is not to say they don't hold any weight at all, but they are distractions. They keep people fighting with each other instead of noticing who's profiting while they do. And this is not uniquely American. Every authoritarian movement in history has used this exact same playbook. McCarthy weaponized like paranoia to silence dissent. Franco purged Spain's intelligentsia in the name of purity. Pol Pot's Cambodia executed anyone who wore glasses. It's the same formula, it's different branding. Keep people angry, keep them ignorant, and make them intensely proud of both. So if ignorance is a political weapon, it's also a business model. Corporations have learned and pretty much nailed the fact that a population that doesn't think critically is a population that buys impulsively, votes predictably, and questions nothing, or at least doesn't question the right things. Critical thought doesn't move product, dopamine spikes do. And like dumb sells. Entertainment has become engineered sedation. It's a perfect blend of outrage and distraction that keeps people reactive but never reflective. Every single second of your attention is an auction, and nuance doesn't perform nearly as well as noise. My last video went into this topic in like a lot more detail if you want to check that one out. Cable news trained us kind of as a society to expect complex issues to fit inside a 30-second soundbite, and social media finished the job by shrinking that into like a 7-second clip. Now we have fast content, which is the intellectual equivalent of junk food. That constant stimulation dulls your discernment and it keeps you scrolling instead of thinking. Outrage is the sugar, misinformation is the fat, and the algorithm is like your air fryer. It tastes amazing until you realize your brain has developed type 2 stupidity. Meanwhile, the billionaire class fund anti-education movements and book bans and parental rights campaigns under the guise of like moral panic. But it's not about morality. It really is never about morality. It's about control. Control the narrative, control the market. If people stop reading and stop questioning and stop thinking critically, then they stop noticing who's actually pulling the strings. Because a distracted population isn't just easier to manipulate, it's a lot more profitable. Social media, as we should all know by now, doesn't reward truth, it rewards engagement. And nothing engages like outrage. It is the cheapest marketing budget ever invented. Outrage is free marketing for the platforms, and we provide it willingly. We love providing it. It might be the closest thing we're ever going to have to like an infinite renewable resource. And certainty spreads faster than nuance. Easy answers spread faster than the complex explanations that are often true. There's actual data showing that emotionally charged content like anger and fear and disgust travels further and faster and longer than factual information. Because I'm right and you're stupid is a way better hook compared to it's complicated and there's actually a lot of variables to weigh out and it doesn't fit neatly into one part of the political spectrum. The algorithm, as usual, doesn't really care who's correct, it just cares who's the most clickable. That's how like do your own research turned into a partisan war cry, or maybe like a group hallucination considering no one is doing their own research. Like one Google search and a podcast and boom, you've got an honorary doctorate apparently. A Google search is not research. People fundamentally do not understand what research actually is. Scientists do research, not Barbara from the Facebook community page. Real research involves methodology and peer review and data analysis and the constant possibility of being wrong. That's what science is. What most people call research now when they claim they've done research is just them looking online for someone who agrees with them. And the moment that you click one conspiracy video, the system goes, oh, do you like that flavor of delusion? Here's 40 more. It's not like a web of information anymore. It's a buffet of confirmation bias. It's refilled hourly. It's refilled every second. We have built a dopamine economy where currency is emotion and the goal is just to keep you scrolling. Rage and fear aren't side effects, they're design features. Every angry comment, every gotcha stitch, every doom scroll at 2 a.m. is data harvested and monetized. Now we're living in what philosophers call epistemic collapse, a fancy pants term for nobody knows what's real anymore. The internet has turned into an infinite buffet of misinformation and everyone is walking around with a plate of dessert, apparently. It feels good going down, but nobody is getting smarter, just buzzed on outrage and begging the algorithm for seconds. The easiest way to control a population isn't by silencing them, it's by reshaping what they're taught to think in the first place. Across the US, public education is being systemically weakened through budget cuts and political interference and ideological campaigns disguised as parental rights. If you can't control what people think, you need to control what they're taught. Public school funding has declined in real terms for many years in many states, and teachers are leaving the profession in record numbers due to low pay and harassment over curriculum content. The US spends more on defense than they do on kids learning what they're defending. What used to be like debates about funding have turned into full-blown culture wars, where math and history and biology are treated as like partisan battlegrounds. At the same time, the push towards privatization and ballooning student debt have turned higher education into a privileged instead of a pathway. The idea of college as a public good has been replaced with a market logic, one where learning is only valuable if it's profitable. The result is an education system that reinforces inequality rather than breaking it. And then there's the censorship. Between 2021 and 2024, thousands of books have been removed from US schools. More recently, those dealing with like race or gender or LGBT themes, again under the banner of like protecting the children from knowledge. What are we talking about? In states like Florida, entire courses have been stripped of content deemed divisive. For example, the whole critical race theory thing. Instead of teaching students factual history, the curriculum is being rewritten to fit a political agenda. It's not about protecting kids, it's about controlling which kids get to see the world as it really is. You know, you can shelter people from all of these topics, but it doesn't stop them from existing. It doesn't stop it from being true. Teachers and scientists, once like trusted voices, are increasingly portrayed as ideological bad actors, which makes no sense to me at all. The same rhetoric used to discredit all journalists and academics has crept into school board meetings, where educators are accused of like indoctrinating students simply for teaching them objective facts about the reality that we live in. And behind a lot of this is a fusion of politics and money and moral panic, where religious fundamentalism and populist messaging intertwine. So we're kind of left with this paradox, which is that critical thinking isn't disappearing by accident. It's being stripped away on purpose. When you defund schools and ban books and replace history with propaganda, you don't just make people ignorant. The less people know, the easier they are to control and to frighten and to turn against each other, most importantly. And that's the real outcome of this like war on education. It's not about protecting children, it never has been. It's about protecting power. Because again, a population that can't tell truth from manipulation is a population that is obedient and easy to control. Intelligence isn't really like admired or like aspired to anymore. It's seen as suspicious, or it's just outright discredited altogether. People trust podcasters, again, over experts, because experts aren't seen as relatable. Knowing things and correcting people makes people defensive, like you are personally attacking them with facts. It makes no sense, and it is a direct result of this concept that everyone's opinion is worth the same as everyone else's in every field, every topic. They're just not. I'm not going to ask a plumber for their opinions on how to fly a plane. I'm not going to ask a pilot for their opinions on how to do surgery. So conspiracy culture as a whole isn't about like seeking truth anymore, if it ever was. It's about tribalism. It's less question everything and more agree with everyone who sounds like me and act holier than thou for opposing the mainstream beliefs, when in reality conspiracy theorists have been the mainstream for like a decade now, and they all parrot the same talking points they're fed online. The irony is brutal. The people screaming about sheeple have just simply picked a new shepherd and they still can't think for themselves. So like, welcome to the Twitter hive, I guess, where a tinfoil hat gets you more likes than logic or facts or education ever did. Emotion has replaced evidence in the court of public opinion. Facts don't turn heads anymore. Feelings do. Reactions do. If you're angry enough or you post like divisive, controversial enough memes and amass enough of an audience, suddenly you're an authority. It's like shouting, "But Your Honor, I feel right," in a courtroom and expecting the gavel to follow. Now we've seen the rise of like meme-based ideology and fast food patriotism. The logic a lot of people follow now is unfortunately quite simple. If it fits in a tweet, it must be true. If it's easy for me to consume, it must be true. And if you saw it in a TikTok once, it is Bible and you are an expert. We have effectively traded evidence for virality. It doesn't matter if it's true, only if it loops well, only if it's shareable, if it comes with subtitles. And what happens when everyone's shouting and nobody is listening? Intellectual exhaustion leads to apathy, and apathy opens the door to authoritarian opportunity. Apathy is how democracy dies, quietly, scrolling, which is how the US has wound up in one of the most laughable and obvious fascist takeover attempts in recent history. Half a country failing an open book test. Like, we've done this before. You've seen this before. You fought against this before. So when people stop thinking and stop trusting actual experts who might know more than them, or just being open to the fact that some people might know more than them, that they don't know everything. They just don't. And simultaneously allow themselves to be riled up by painfully obvious propaganda, they ironically become more compliant and paranoid, too drained to question power, but just angry enough to blame their neighbors who are in the same boat as them. A culture that devalues and mocks intelligence doesn't collapse overnight, but it does rot from the inside until it just convinces itself that being loud and obnoxious is the same thing as being right, and we are in a race to the bottom. So, big question, who benefits from all of this? Someone is cashing in on all of this chaos and confusion. Let's talk about who that is. None of this has happened by accident. Stupidity is profitable and ignorance is a resource. Politicians figured out that if you frame ignorance as identity, you get loyalty that logic can't even touch. When people, whether they realize it or not, see thinking critically and making decisions based on facts as a form of betrayal, they will defend their team no matter how wrong it is. Blind allegiance is much easier to manage than informed debate, and it's a lot more predictable on election day. Under this system, people will vote against their own self-interest to maintain allegiance to a system that is exploiting them. That's how effective this conditioning is. And corporations profit too. Your burnout isn't a glitch, it's a feature that sells you comfort afterwards. The more overwhelmed people feel, the easier it is to sell them that comfort. Outrage keeps you online, exhaustion keeps you consuming. An informed population might demand fairness or accountability, but a population that is tired and cynical and suspicious of anyone that is smarter than them, that's perfect. They won't organize, they'll argue, and they won't question anything, they'll just comply. And the media sits comfortably in the middle of all of this, turning division into a business model. Outrage is engagement, and engagement is money. Every single fight, every false dichotomy, every debate that ends in yelling, all of it pays. The truth is, the dumbing down of a society isn't necessarily just cultural decay. It is a really good strategy for the ruling class. That's kind of as simple as this is, to be honest. Could have made this a 15-second video. Keeping people confused and reactive and divided serves the same few people at the top, not even the same 1%, the same 0.1%. Because the less you understand, the easier it is to be controlled and the more profitable your confusion becomes. So how do we fight back against all of this? You don't need a PhD. You don't need a manifesto, you don't need a bunker in the woods. Just basic curiosity, an openness to maybe be wrong, and the ability to pause before reposting something that made your blood pressure spike. Start with the obvious, check your sources, actually read who wrote it, read who's paying for it. Half the independent truth tellers online are just sales reps for a political party, or they're only running their mouth to sell supplements that promise to decalcify your pineal gland or some shit. Follow the funding, always. And for the love of God, read the full article. Headlines are like Tinder bios. They're sometimes technically true, but they're missing 95% of the context, almost always. If your entire argument fits into a meme, you are not informed, you're being marketed to. Then diversify what you consume. If everything you watch makes you feel right, you are probably wrong about a lot of things. If every person that you follow agrees with you, congratulations, you've built a very culty echo chamber for yourself. Watch international news, read something from the other side of the political spectrum, even if it annoys you, possibly especially if it annoys you. Worst case scenario, you are more informed than you were before. If you're conservative, maybe consume some liberal talking heads and vice versa. Just to see, growth can't happen inside an echo chamber. Learn to say the words, I might be wrong. It really won't kill you. It's actually kind of freeing. Remove the ego from finding out new information. Being wrong is a good thing because it means you now have the right information, you're learning something. And maybe, and this is gonna have to be a group effort, but I think we do need to start making curiosity social again. Not everything has to be a debate, not everything has to be a gotcha moment. You don't have to be out to prove everyone wrong all the time and be right all of the time. You can just talk to people, you can just ask questions, you can wonder out loud. Curiosity is contagious. Condescension isn't. On a bigger scale, it might look like it's showing up for things that keep knowledge alive and keep knowledge a community effort. Support the funding of your local libraries, back teachers instead of politicians who call them indoctrinators. Who is going to uni to become a teacher, to be around kids or young people all the time, to be underpaid just so they can indoctrinate some kids? Use your brain. Who is doing that? Support independent journalists. Support journalists who are leaving their houses, the ones that are risking lawsuits, not the ones chasing easy clicks. Widespread support of these things is what actual information costs in a world that is freely giving away misinformation for free all the time. Because if there is one thing that terrifies the ruling class, terrifies the people in charge, it's not really rebellion. It is ultimately a population that can and will think for themselves, can and will ask questions, can and will find out the truth. A population who reads the fine print and asks who benefits and knows the difference between expertise and ego is the thing that they are scared of happening. That's why they fight so hard against it. Rebuilding like a thinking culture isn't something that we can fix overnight, but it is about refusing to stay numb. It's choosing to think and to read and to ask questions and to stay curious even when it's so much easier not to do that. Because that's one thing the system can't really automate or monetize, is people who still give a shit enough to actually think for themselves. So we live in a world where asking questions or pushing back on people's opinions can feel like a personal attack a lot of the time. Everyone is very, very polarized. You can say, hey, maybe that stat isn't true, and suddenly you're an intellectual elitist. Like you just kicked someone's emotional support conspiracy. But the good news is critical thinking is the main antidote to manipulation. We can't like outspend billionaires or out-yell politicians, but we can refuse to be stupid on command. And that's power on its own. Curiosity is its own power. It can stop the scroll. It can make people look up. It ruins perfectly good propaganda. They don't want you curious, they want you predictable. Division is profitable. It always keeps the ads running, and they don't care if we're divided. In fact, they're banking on it. What freaks them out is when we start comparing notes. Blind and ignorant outrage keeps the system and the establishment's lights on, and curiosity and education and knowledge cuts the power. Let me know what your stance on this is in the comments. I can't wait to hear what you guys think. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. This whole video actually came about as like a result of a conversation I had with my friend the other day that I just wanted to get more into. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around this entire video. If you've made it this far, leave a comment, leave a like. It really helps out the channel. Helps out a lot more than I think people think it does. Make your bed, eat your veggies, and I will see you in the next one.